At exactly 6 in the morning, chaos ripped across my quiet Texas ranch when a damaged Cessna spiraled downward and crash-landed hard into my open pasture field. I sprinted outside, half-dressed, heart hammering wildly, boots forgotten. As smoke curled upward and the smell of burning fuel mixed with early morning mist, the pilot, barely more than a kid, staggered out clutching his wrist, whispering apologies while shock and pain flickered across his pale, terrified face. I grabbed my emergency kit and rushed forward, ignoring everything else, focused only on keeping that boy conscious until real help could arrive. Sirens screamed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Cutting through the peaceful dawn that had existed just moments before disaster struck, fire trucks rolled in, foam spraying across twisted metal, paramedics kneeling beside the pilot, voices sharp, controlled, urgent in the thickening chaos. And then she arrived like a storm no one asked for, Darlene Wickham marching across my land in silk pajamas, an absolute, unbelievable outrage. She didn't look at the injured pilot, didn't acknowledge the fire crew, didn't even hesitate before pointing at the wreckage like it personally offended her. "You have 24 hours to remove this trash or face fines," she shouted, voice slicing through sirens and human suffering without a shred of hesitation. Even the paramedics paused mid-treatment, stunned into silence as her words echoed across the pasture like something unreal, something completely disconnected from reality. I stood slowly, wiping my hands, staring at her with calm that came from years of dealing with worse storms than this ridiculous moment unfolding. "Lady," I said quietly, "that's a federal investigator pulling into my driveway, and everything you're saying right now is about to matter more than you think." Her confidence cracked instantly, color draining from her face as black SUVs rolled closer, gravel crunching beneath tires that signaled authority far beyond "hey, nonsense." What she didn't understand yet was simple. This crash wasn't just an accident. It was the beginning of something that would unravel her entire, carefully built empire. "My name is Garrett Sullivan, 52 years old, former Air Force mechanic, now a rancher who values peace, independence, and the quiet rhythm of honest work. This land had been in my family for generations, long before subdivisions and HOAs existed, long before people like Darlene believed they could control everything around them. My mornings were predictable: coffee, cattle, fences, and the steady satisfaction of building something real with my hands, far removed from suburban drama. But everything changed when developers arrived, carving farmland into identical houses, bringing rules, expectations, and eventually, someone who thrived on control. Darlene Wickham didn't just move in, she conquered, inserting herself into HOA leadership and transforming it into a weapon against anyone who didn't fit her vision. First, it was the Ramirez family, their garden suddenly a violation. Their language barrier exploited, their dignity chipped away through relentless paperwork and pressure. Then came the Johnsons, their children's basketball hoop labeled a threat, their joy recast as disruption, their presence quietly challenged through constant complaints. Pattern after pattern revealed itself, each target carefully chosen, each attack precise, systematic, and designed to push people out without ever appearing openly hostile. When she came for me, it was about my workshop, a building older than her entire subdivision suddenly labeled an eyesore needing removal or repainting. I explained calmly that my property predated her authority, legally protected, untouched by HOA rules, something she clearly did not appreciate hearing at all. Since then, she tried everything: complaints, inspections, legal threats. Each attempt failing because, unlike her assumptions, I followed every rule that actually mattered. The morning of the crash simply gave her a new angle, a new opportunity to assert control over something completely beyond her jurisdiction or understanding. But behind her outrage was something deeper, something calculated, something that started revealing itself piece by piece as I began asking the right questions. A call to an old friend in federal aviation uncovered something strange. A complaint filed months before the crash. It's filled with technical language most civilians wouldn't know. That meant one thing: she wasn't reacting to events. She was anticipating them, preparing narratives before reality even unfolded in front of her. Suddenly, this wasn't about a crash or a complaint. It was about intent, planning, and something far more dangerous than a controlling neighbor. I started digging deeper: records, timelines, conversations. patterns emerging like puzzle pieces, forming a picture no one else had noticed yet. Other neighbors began sharing stories: harassment, pressure, threats, all leading toward one consistent outcome: forcing people to sell their homes under stress. Properties bought cheaply, flipped quickly. Profits quietly collected through a company linked directly back to Darlene herself. This wasn't enforcement, it was exploitation. Business model disguised as neighborhood management, targeting vulnerability and turning it into profit. The crash had simply accelerated everything, exposing her behavior in front of witnesses, cameras, and eventually federal attention she could not control. As investigations expanded, more evidence surfaced: insurance complaints, false reports, even attempts to manipulate professional reputations of those she targeted. Rico's job was questioned, Martha's community involvement challenged. Each move designed to isolate, weaken, and pressure them into compliance or departure. But instead of breaking us apart, it did the opposite. It brought us together, turning isolated victims into a coordinated group ready to push back. Meetings formed, documents shared, strategies discussed, and for the first time, Darlene's targets began acting as a united front. Legal support followed, someone who understood exactly what was happening. Not just harassment, but discrimination wrapped in policy language. Patterns of selective enforcement became undeniable, targeting specific demographics under the guise of maintaining neighborhood standards. Federal attention intensified, aviation complaints traced, data misuse uncovered, connections leading back to sources she should never have accessed. Her confidence began to crack publicly, meetings becoming confrontations, presentations challenged, narratives questioned in ways she couldn't easily control. Still, she escalated: lawsuits, intimidation, surveillance, pushing harder instead of stepping back, convinced pressure would force surrender. But pressure only created more evidence, more witnesses, more documentation, everything building toward something inevitable and irreversible. One night, emergency crews arrived again, false reports triggering responses, resources wasted, danger fabricated to support her claims. Cameras captured everything, patterns confirmed, timelines aligning perfectly with her movements and actions. Federal investigators stepped in fully, not just reviewing complaints, but examining behavior, intent, and the broader pattern across multiple locations. It turned out this wasn't isolated. Similar actions in other areas, similar outcomes, similar profits, a repeating cycle of manipulation and gain. Charges began forming, serious ones: fraud, intimidation, false reporting, each backed by documentation she unknowingly helped create herself. Still, she pushed further. Social media campaigns, misinformation, attempting to control perception even as reality tightened around her. But digital footprints told their own story. Accounts linked, posts traced, narratives collapsing under simple technical analysis. Her allies began stepping away, distance growing as risk became visible and association dangerous. The community meeting was her final attempt, a polished presentation meant to reclaim control and reinforce her version of reality. For a moment, it worked. The audience listened. Concerns seemed valid without context or contradiction. Then the questions started, simple ones, about timing, about knowledge, about how she knew what she claimed before events even occurred. Silence followed, hesitation, cracks widening as her answers failed to align with facts already documented elsewhere. That's when federal investigators stepped forward, presenting findings, clarifying truths, dismantling her claims piece by piece in front of everyone. The room shifted instantly, perception flipping, suspicion turning toward her instead of those she had targeted for so long. Legal representatives followed, outlining patterns, damages, and the broader impact her actions had created across multiple families. The narrative she built collapsed completely, replaced by documented reality she could not argue against or escape. Her composure broke, anger replacing control. Words slipping out that confirmed everything she had tried to hide behind policy language. In that moment, it was no longer about rules or property, it was about intent, and everyone in that room finally saw it clearly. Agents moved in, warrants ready, charges finalized, and for the first time, she had no control over what happened next. The silence during her arrest was heavy, not dramatic, just final. The kind of quiet that follows something long overdue. Cameras captured everything, not for spectacle, but as record. Proof of what happens when power is misused for too long. Outside, the atmosphere shifted completely, tension replaced with relief. Conversations no longer whispered, but shared openly among neighbors. The aftermath unfolded steadily. Legal processes, asset investigations, restitution discussions, each step rebuilding what had been damaged. Properties returned, families stabilized, the cycle she created finally broken by exposure and accountability. The HOA itself changed, oversight introduced, policies rewritten, ensuring no single person could ever hold that kind of unchecked control again. Relationships within the community transformed, strangers becoming allies through shared experience and collective resistance. Martha's Garden became a gathering place, once targeted, now celebrated as something that brought people together instead of dividing them. Adiko's family thrived again, his children playing freely, no longer under constant scrutiny or pressure from manufactured complaints. My ranch returned to quiet mornings, but now with something new: connection, people stopping by, conversations replacing isolation. The crash that started everything became just a story, but the impact it triggered continued shaping everything around us. Lessons spread beyond our neighborhood, others learning, documenting, organizing before situations escalated as far as ours had. Legal precedents formed, cited in other cases, reinforcing protections that many people didn't even realize they had before. Awareness replaced ignorance, and with it came confidence, the understanding that systems could be challenged when used incorrectly. The pilot from that morning recovered fully, even visited months later, unaware of the chain reaction his crash had started. We laughed about it, not because it was funny, but because sometimes chaos reveals truths that would otherwise stay hidden indefinitely. Looking back, every warning sign had been there, just scattered, isolated, easy to ignore until patterns connected clearly. It took something dramatic to bring everything into focus, something impossible to dismiss or downplay as normal conflict. But once seen, it couldn't be unseen, and once challenged, it couldn't continue operating the same way ever again. The idea of control changed completely, from something enforced to something shared and balanced within the community itself. Trust rebuilt slowly, not through words, but through consistent actions and mutual support over time. The silence that once filled interactions disappeared, replaced by openness and a willingness to stand together when needed. No one forgot what happened, but it stopped being a source of fear and became a reminder of what collective action could achieve. Systems didn't become perfect, but they became accountable, and that made all the difference moving forward. That every new neighbor heard the story, not as gossip, but as a lesson. A foundation for understanding how easily power can be misused, and how quickly things can change when people decide they won't accept it anymore. The ranch remained the same physically: fences, fields, buildings, but the meaning behind it shifted in ways I never expected. It wasn't just a refuge anymore. It was a place where something important had happened, something that changed lives beyond its boundaries. Sometimes I still think about that morning, the crash, the chaos, the moment everything started unraveling. Not because of the danger, but because of what it revealed underneath years of quiet, unnoticed manipulation, and how one unexpected event forced everything into the open, where it could finally be confronted and stopped. So if you ever wonder how something small can trigger something massive, just remember, sometimes it only takes one moment for everything to change.